So let's discuss today's daf is Masechta Gittin, Masechta Kidushin Daf Yud. So I just want to go over here what we're discussing over here. Interesting. We're discussing that the pasuk says, how do you know that we learned in the Mishnah that you could be mekadosh a woman with bia, and how do you know it? Because it says ki yikach ish isha. Now ubala, and you do bia. So simple enough. That's how you know one of the kinyanim, one of the ways to acquire a woman for kedushin is do bia, but that's not so simple because Rabbi Yochanan says I have to have another pasuk. Why? Because if you read this pasuk yikach ish isha ubala, the pasuk you would read this as and he does bia. In other words, not only to acquire a woman, you have to give her money plus do bia, and then go to a chuppah with her. The chuppah we're not talking about. In order to do kedushin, I would think you need to do both. That's why Rabbi Yochanan brought another pasuk called Be'ulas Baal. That another pasuk that says that in order that the way to acquire a woman is only if you do bia. You don't need to do anything else. That's Rabbi Yochanan's pasuk, and then we're in the middle of that discussion. I want to point out to you that the Gemara is going to deal with such a important point over here, and that is like this. When you say that you can mekadosh a woman with bia, what do you mean? Do you mean the initial penetration? And as soon as you penetrate, that's when you acquire that you're kind of the isha, or is after you release, after you ejaculate. So that's the soif bia. So the Gemara says the Gemara is going to have that question. And what's the difference? Because let's say a woman, the man is in the first act of bia, penetrating. If he's not kind of the woman until the end, so then if in the middle of the bia she sticks out of her hand and accepts kedushin from a strange person, from another person, she's mukudeshes to the second person because the first person didn't finish up his kinyan yet. So if she just got kesef from somebody else, she would be mukudeshes to that other person in the middle of the act of bia. That's part of the Gemara, what the Gemara is going to discuss. One other point of introduction over here is like this. That is that the Gemara, that there are three, the Chumash describes in this week's Parsha that if a person has rapes or seduces an unmarried Nara, a 12-year-old girl, so then there's a knas of 50 kesef or 100 kesef that he has to pay, 100 shkalim that he has to pay, 50 shkalim to the father, right? That's a Nara, plain Nara. If this Nara, this 12-year-old girl gets married and someone's mizana with her, she's a married woman. Every married woman, the misa is bechenek, choking. But the Chumash does say in this week's Parsha, Nara, if we have a 12-year-old girl and 2 points, Besula, she's a virgin, Mu'ayrasal ish, and she's only has kedushin to a man. So she's kedushin and she didn't go to chuppah yet, and she's a Besula. So then if she has relations with somebody else, then the Torah gives you a special misa called skila. Then the Torah says if both of them did it willingly, you take them out and you take them to the gate of the city, you scout them and you give them skila and they kill them both. So the exception for the normal mizana with an ashes ish, normal mizana with an ashes ish is chenek, but if it's a nara besula, nara murasa, that's what it's called, nara besula ma'irasa, you get skila. So with those introductions, we're going to go over here to the Gemara, which we left off yesterday. The Gemara again said,
"Is there a difference in the example you just gave? You know that they were together, and now you're going to take them outside, and you're going to kill them. But in your first question, you asked at what point is the act considered an act? Is it just initial or end? But you don't ask that in the case of them being alone or raped, whatever. How do you, is there no qualifications to that? In other words, if she says I'm raped, in the end, all he did was begin it and then he stopped, is that rape, or those are two different requirements? One is for kedushin and one is for rape.
So that's an excellent question, and the answer to that question is like this: that for rape it would be the beginning. is enough. I think you do ha'ara as soon as you initial penetrate, then you did the avera and the chayiv the fine of a 50 shekel. But here we're talking about a person who actually completed the bia. He did a whole act, right? And his whole mind is thinking that I want to acquire this woman, and he completed the act. The fact that he completed the act and he was thinking in the direction, so the Gemara is going to say that the time that he acquired the woman was when he finished the act.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. But most things, let's say you could ask it also by arayas, an erva. You're not allowed to sleep with your sister. So is it the complete act, or it's just the initial penetration? The answer is the initial, the tchilas bia, already a chayiv misa for that.
Okay.
So the Gemara says like this: the Mask of Rabbi Yochanan brought a pasuk, and Rabbi Yochanan said that if it would say uba'ala imahasam hava mina, I would have thought adam makadesh v'hadar boil, that every kedushin needs a bia to it. That's why I need to bring another pasuk. Uba'ala was not enough, right? That's why Rabbi Yochanan brought another pasuk called Ba'ulas Baal. That teaches you that a Baal who does bia, that you're kind of just with the bia alone. Maskif lo Rab Abba Bamam. Rab Mama asked the question: Im came, if it's so that every kedushin needs a bia, that means if you mekadesh with kesef, you need to do bia in order to complete the kedushin. If that's what you think, right? Because from the pasuk, that's what it seems. Ki yikach ish isha, you take them, you give kesef, ubala, and then do bia, then you acquire the woman. If that's the case, Rabbi Mama's question, in Nara Murasa, the Amar Achmana Beskila, how could you have an engaged woman that's still a basula? That case that the Torah talks about that gets skila, how is it possible? If the person did a normal kedushin by giving her money, and then did bia to her in order to acquire her as his kedushin wife, but he had to do bia, so ba'uli, she's automatically not a virgin anymore. She's automatically a ba'ula. And therefore, but the Torah stresses she's a basula. Ida Akdish, if you just gave kesef money, v'loy ba'al, and you didn't do bia, lav klumhi, the lav klumhi, then you didn't do anything. You didn't do any kedushin. So the Gemara says, Amrura Rabbanan Kameda Abaya. They explained it. Mishkachas la kagoin shaba lel oras shalei kedarka. The Gemara says that there is a possibility that he was mazana with her, not in the normal sex way. He did it the other way. And therefore, she's a basula because she didn't penetrate the normal way. And also, he consummated the kedushin. He gave her kesef, did bia shaloi kedarka, and that's all that works. So that makes her still a basula. Amalei Abaya said, that's not true. If a man would do bia shaloi kedarka, he did the bia through the backside. So then she still she now becomes a ba'ula. You don't look at her as a virgin, because Atkan loy plig Rabbi Rabbanan. Rabbi and Rabbanan don't have an argument about bia shloi kedarka. Does it make you a ba'ula? Not ela ba'acher. Only if a strange man does bia like that. Avabal divrei hakol. If the husband is doing it this way, divrei hakol in ba'al shloi kedarka. If a husband does that to his wife, even though he never did the normal way, asu a ba'ula. She's a ba'ula. And therefore, Mahi, what is the machlekes between Rebbe and Rabbanan? The Tanya we learned to the Brisa, and by Anara Hamurasa, right? That's a basula, right? So the Brisa says, Bo'alet Yura Nashim, 10 men could be mizana with this woman, and she still could by daini basula. She could still be a basula because they came shloi kedarka. So each subsequent man views her as a basula woman, and therefore a basula engaged woman, and therefore each one of them, kulam beskila, will get skila. Rabbi says, Oimani, I think like this: if you do bia shloi kedarka, it's nothing. You made her a ba'ula. Harishan, the first one that did it with this basula, nara marasa, get skila, v'kulam mechenik, they all get kenek. So, but the argument is only if a strange man did bia shloi kedarka. But everybody would agree, even the Rabbanan would agree, that if a husband does bia shloi kedarka, she's a ba'ula. So again, what is the case of Nara Marasa? You have to have her engaged, but she's still a basula. If according to what you're thinking is that every ba'ula, every kedusha kesef needed a be'i attached to it. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak. Well, we could say that the Torah says, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Mishkachas lo kagoin shekidusho b'shtar. Hoyel v'goymer or moitzi goymer machnes. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said maybe the Chumash is talking about that you mekadosh this woman, this lady. You gave it nara basula. How do you get her to be a marasa? You mekadosh her with shtar. Everybody agrees that shtar does not need bia to it, not kedushay kesef. So therefore, since shtar could absolve a marriage, it could make a marriage complete. So Rabbi Yochanan again, he had another pasuk called Be'ulas Baal, teach you that you mekadosh anisha with bia. So the Gemara says, "Hi ubala my avadle." What does he do with the word ubala? What does he use it for? Answers the Gemara, "Hu mabayile," and he needs it for to teach you like this, a fascinating thing. Zu niknas bebia. A wife, you could be kinder with bia. Vein ama havriya niknas bebia. If you're buying a girl, let's say a 7-year-old girl, to be your maid, a Jewish 7-year-old girl, you could only acquire her by giving money to the father, but not by having intercourse with the ama havriya. It's a strange thing. Because it's an amazing thing. I would have thought, and this girl's coming to work for you. If you want to kind of her, you have to do bia with her. I would think like that. Why? I would learn that out from a kal v'chayim from Yavama. Uma Yavama, when you acquire a Yavama, she'ein niknas b'kasef. A Yavama, the only way to acquire a Yavama is not with kasef, but it's niknas b'bia. The Yavam has to have bia with the Yavama. That's the only way you acquire a Yavama. Zu, this Amma Avriya, a 12-year-old, a 7-year-old girl, we know she's a niknas b'kasef. You can buy her with money. I would think that in case you don't have money, the way you acquire her is do bia with her. Certainly she should be acquired with bia. So the Gemara says that's why I need ubala only a woman that you want to marry you acquire with bia, not a girl that's gonna serve you as a maid. So the Gemara says, why should I learn such a kal v'chayma? Yavama is already bonded to you. That's why you acquire her with bia, not an Amar Avriya. So the Gemara says again, it says by a Yavama, Amar Avriya, if you want to marry somebody else, the Torah compares an Amar Avriya to a married woman. Just like a married woman, to marry a woman, right? You acquire her by doing bia. I would have thought that an Amavriya you acquire with bia. Kamash Malam. That's why I need the pasuk ubala to teach you a fascinating thing. That only if you're getting a woman in marriage, then you do bia. But if you're getting a woman to serve you as a maid, then you don't need bia. Says the Gemara. I get noven. Ja, mit ungeheuben. Und wir fangt jede Nacht, Be'ezus Hashem, 8:30, halb 9. So from now on.
Yeah.
Okay. V'Rebbe, hi svar menole. How do you know that you're kind of Amar Avriya with only kesef, not bia? And came lichte rachmanu bal. My ubala. Why does it say ubala? So you can learn two things. Shmami no atarti. You can learn two things from it. One, you acquire a woman with bia, according to Rebbe, and also only a woman you acquire with bia, not an Amar Avriya. Ola Rava, Barahina Asberli, Rava, who said, Barahina explained to me why Rava had a problem. What happens if a person throws kesef money to two sisters and says, which way, I don't know, I'm a kaddish one of you. Are both usher? So Rava said, Barahina explained to him that none of them are usher. You would think that he gave money to one of them, so he just didn't say which one. So each one could be in a chais ishtai. So the Barahina explained to him that none of them, that kedushin doesn't work because it says kikach ish ubala kedushin hamasurun labia. Only a kedushin where you have the possibility to do bia have a kedushin. That's kedushin. Kedushin say masurun labia loy have a kedushin. That's not a kedushin that you can't do bia with. Ma'iklamema. What are you going to say about that? According to Rava, you need the pasuk ubala to teach you. You need a kedushin hamasurun labia. So and says the Gemara in Kain nichta lakra oibala. The Torah could have written oibala, my ubala. Why does it say ubala? Shmamina kuli, that you learn all three lemudim. So according to Rebbe, when you have this pasuk, kikach ish ubala, it teaches you three things. What's three things? One, you're kind of a woman with bia. Number two, ubala, only a woman you're kind with bia, not an amarvia. And number three is that the kedushin only works if there's a possibility to do bia. If someone throws kedushin money to two sisters, that kedushin can never lead to bia because you don't know which sister is yours, is your wife. Therefore, that kedushin money is worthless and it's not a kedushin. Now the Gemara goes back. The Rebbe who learned to be a obala, teaches you that you kind of issue with bilia. Hi bulas baal, my avadle. What does he do with the word buulas baal? What does that teach you? Hi mebayle. That teaches you baal oisa oisa bulish like a darka. Vein acher oisa oisa bulish like a darka. That teaches you only husband that does biash like a darka makes her a buula. So, Frank the Gemara, what do you mean? Rebbe uses that. Miyisle Rebbe Haisvara. Does Rebbe hold like that? That nobody can make her a bu'ula shleika darka. We learned that by Nara Murasa Basula, that 10 people come onto her, right? She's still considered a basula, and all of them get skila. That's the opinion of Rabbanan. But Rebbe, this is the point. Rebbe Oimani, Harishim Beskila, the Kulam Mechanic. The first one's only Beskila because he did a bia. And the Kulam, the Chenek, all of them get regular Chenek because she's a Be'ula now, even though the first one did Biyash like a Darka. So Rebbe holds that everybody makes, everybody who does Be'ula Shloik Kedarka, Biyash like a Darka to a woman, makes her a Be'ula. So what does that mean? We go to the top of the page. Reb Zera says, Moide Rebbe Linyan Knas. Moide Rebbe Linyan Knas, the Kulam Mishalmi. Rebbe would hold that Biyash like a Darka only makes her a ba'ula when it comes to killing a person. But let's say by knas, let's say that a girl who's not married, and we know that if you ma'anis a girl who's not married, you have to pay 50 shekel. Let's say you have 10 people raping the girl, and they're all doing it shleik kedarka. Rebbe would hold that each one has to pay the knas. She's still considered a bisula, even though each one is doing a biyah shleik kedarka. And therefore, only the husband who does biyash like kedarka makes her a ba'ula, nobody else. Why by ketala? Like when we're coming to killing the person, the strange people we don't consider them when they do biyash like kedarka make her a ba'ula. Shad hasim, because there it's different. Amakra meisi ish ashashachet imay levada. Only the first guy who slept with her, only him alone you kill. But if another 9 people come and do biyash like a darkai, they won't be killed in the same manner. In other words, they won't be killed in the same manner. They will be killed with chenek, with skila. Gemara just finishes up. Rabbanan hold that every biyash like a darkai does not make her a bu'ula. What do they use with levade? The baile that teaches you, look at the Tanya. Meisa gam shneim achi yishavim ke'echad. The Rabbi Shaya. They use it to teach you that even if a gadol has bia with a girl who's married, right? A girl who's married, who's a katana. So the only one that's chayiv misa is the man. He gets killed by himself, and we're not concerned with the katana. Rabbi Yochanan hai svara benole. How does Rabbi Yochanan know that's false? Svara, that idea of that when she's a katana and he's a gadol, he would be chayiv misa. They don't have to both be gedolim. So the Gemara says, "Manali in kenichtav kram bulas ish, my bulas bal shmai minotarte." You see 2 things from it. Number one, you see from there that only the husband bulas bal, only the husband only a husband who does bia shalai kedarka, that's called bia. And also, you see, main thing is that to acquire a woman, bia alone acquires the woman. You don't need to give kesef. Okay, so you got the basic point that there are 2 sources of where you know bia is kaina. Now comes the main question of the day. The Gemara asks the question: Chilas bia kaina or soif bia kaina? Is it the initial bia? Does that make the kinyan, or soif bia kaina, or when you finish the act? Nafkamina, what would be the nafkamina? Kegoin sheheraba, he did an initial penetration, and while he's doing that penetration, upashta yada v'kibla kedushim achar, she sticks out her hand and she accepts kedushin from somebody else. If already the penetration, she belongs to the man she's doing bia with, so then her accepting kedusha from somebody else is worthless. But if you say that the kinyan happens at the end, then if she captures kedusha from somebody else, she's going to be pekudeshes to that somebody else. Another nafkamina would be like this: a kohen should not be able to do bia. A kohen gadol should not be able to acquire a woman with bia, because if you say gemar bia koina, that means as soon as he does the tchilas bia, he made her a be'ula. Then when does he acquire her as a wife? At the end of the bia. So already at the end of the bia, you're acquiring a woman that's already a be'ula. And the Torah says a kohen gadol has to be only acquire a woman that's a basula. So the kohen gadol will never be able to do bia as his choice of kedushin. He would only be able to do star. And for the Gemara, Omar Abei Mishmei Derova, Kol Haboyel Daite Al Gemar Bia. That's the point. That if you're doing a complete bia, right, then you're thinking that you only want to be koine her at the end, not at the beginning. So normally, if a guy just does initial penetration and backs away, yes, you could acquire a woman that way. But if he does the initial penetration and then completes the bia, the kinyan happens at the end. Now the Gemara says like this: since we know that if a person acquires a woman with bia, he can actually do bia a second time, and that will be instead of going, that will be the nesuin. If you do bia twice, that's a nesuin. You don't even have to have a chuppah, because the second bia already is considered like a chuppah. So, but the question of the Gemara is, can I be yotzei the nesuin and the erisin with one bia? That's the question. Bia nesuin oisa or erisin oisa? Can bia do nesuin, or it only does erisin? Imagine that a person wants to pater himself from paying for $100,000 wedding, so all he has to do is bia with his wife, and that will accomplish both. It can make nesuin and erisin at the same time. Or is it only doing erisin? Nafkamina, very simple nafkamina. If it only does erisin, so liyarsha, can you yarshin her? Ulatamala, can you matama her if you're a kohen? Could you nullify Nedarim by yourself? In other words, are you really her husband? If you can say that one bia makes her a nesua, yarsha matamala mefer Nedarel. If you have in mind that with this bia I want to do the whole nesuin package, then at when you finish the bia, she's not your wife. You yarish her, you matamat her, you mefer Nedarel. But the amrit, if you want to say Erison Isa, Aina Yarshav, Aina Matama, Aina May from Darel. What's the case? What's the din? So the Gemara is just asking this very basic question. You said that Bia could kind of a wife. Let's say a guy says, I want this Bia not only to make her Kedushin, but I want her to make her my whole wife as if I married her. And therefore I want to be Yairish her and made for her Nadarim. So Amar Abaya. So what's the din? Amar Abaya says, Tashma, come in here. Ha'av, a father of, let's say, a 7-year-old girl, right? Zakai, he has the rights, Bevita in his daughter, Bikdusha, to marry her off in Kedusha, Bekesef, accepting Kesef money, Bishtar, by getting Bishtar from somebody, Ubabia, and he can force her to have relations with somebody as the initial part of marriage. V'zakai b'mitziosei. If she finds something, he gets to keep it. If she earns money as a counselor somewhere, he gets the payment. He can make for her nadarim. And after she's married, he can accept the get. If somehow she gets Yerusha, he doesn't get to keep the rent money from that Yerusha. Let's say her grandfather from her mother's side died, and her mother also died, and there's no other Yarshim, so she inherited this apartment building. And he doesn't get to keep the rent. They put it in a trust for her. When she becomes a gadol, then it becomes all hers. Nises, if she actually, this katana, got married to somebody and went to chuppah with somebody, Yasav al-Baal, the Baal, her husband, has one advantage over her father. He gets to eat. If she inherited an asset, the asset belongs to her, but he gets to get the rent money. But the point of the proof is, it says bia and it says nises. So it's mashma from the brisa. That's two different steps. Step one would be bia, and if she goes to chuppah, then the husband takes over. So we see that bia only makes erisin and not nesuin. Ketana bia. First it says bia, uketani nisis, and then it says she gets married. So how do you square that off? After the Gemara, ki ketani nisis asha'ara. When it says nisis, it doesn't refer to bia. Actually, bia can do two birds with one stone, nesuin and erisin. But if you do kesav and shtar, in order to get a real husband, she has to have to go to chuppah. So it's no proof from that brisa. Rava said, Tashma, come in here. If you have a girl who's just turned 3 years old, so at that point, then she has a din like you can marry her off. Miskadeshes bebia. A father could force her to do bia and become kedushin. Vimbala yavam, a yavam that if she fell to yibam, kana, the yavam could acquire her by doing bia with her. The chayavan allow mishum eishes is if she's married to somebody and she's just 3 years old, somebody who has relations with her is chayav because she has relations with the eishes is. Umatamas bayela, if she becomes a nida and her husband does bia with her, the husband becomes tameh. We go to Amid Beis, the tameh mishkav tachten ke'elyon, like a regular bayal nida, that anything that's on that who has a din rishon l'tomo. Then again, she was miskadeshes bebia, right? The imnisis, if this 3-year-old girl got married, l'koyim, oicheles betruma, she eats truma. The imbala, and she eats truma because now she's married to a kohen. Imbala echad mikol haroyos b'Torah. If anybody has any of their erva royas of the Torah, let's say her brother has relations with his sister that's 3 years old, they get to be put to death because of her. The hipatura, of course, she's pater, like we just learned earlier today, that even if she's not going to go to Misa, but he could go to Misa because he's a gadol that did relations. Then if she had relations with a goy, he disqualified her from a kohuna. So these are the halachas of a 3-year-old girl. But what if you see the brisa closely, it says ketana bia. It says that if she does kedushin with bia, then she has these halachas, and then it says the ketani nises, and then it says if she actually went to chuppah, then these things happen to her. And then the brisa is not talking about you did kesef and shtar as kedushin. So therefore, how do you square off the brisa? The brisa seems to imply that bia only does erisin. Answers the Gemara, Hachi Kamar, this is what the brisa means to say. If they are married to a kohen, she can eat truma. So that doesn't mean bia can do everything. What the Gemara, and this is where we'll stop. Bia can do everything according to the way that you don't have a proof from the brisa. Maybe bia can do everything, erisin and nesuin. But what the brisa means to say, the imnises means that if this happened, if you did the bia with a kohen as a kedushin erisin, as an erisin nesuin package, then she could eat truma. But it's not that you need to do a chuppah, because the way you could learn the brisa is that bia can do both erisin and nesuin. So we're going to deal with this Be'ez Hashem tomorrow to try to come to a conclusion. Okay, I'll get to nach.